Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him, Jack Welch. Hello, Mr. Welch.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you, sir? Can you hear me well?
Very well. I can hear you very clearly.
Oh, well, in this forum, we have two renowned scholars and administrators of universities. And also, we have about 800 distinguished guests on the floor. Would you like to say hello to them?
I would very much like to say hello to all of my good friends in Korea, particularly my good friend Jane Kang, who is the president of GHRF for many years. And I would like to make a few comments before we have the conversation. Tonight is election night in the United States. It appears that we will have, by all of the polling and all of the early results, a new president by the name of Barack Obama. He takes over a country that's been challenged by an enormous financial crisis, as has the rest of the world, most of the world. The financial crisis seems to be coming under some control as the result of some terrific work by governments around the world. It's a time when all of us capitalists had to yell for help. And the government showed up. But the impact of the crisis is no question causing real problems in the real economy now. I hate the feedback. The real economy is falling back very quickly. In the US, we will have a fourth quarter that will probably be the worst quarter we have had in many, many years. I think we'll have negative growth of 3 to 4% in the fourth quarter. And the first half of next year will not be much better. We will start to come out of it, by everyone's analysis, towards the end of next year. But every exporting country in the world will feel the cold drafts of this weakened US and Euro economy. I want to congratulate the people in Korea, both the regulators and the bankers, who have stayed away from much of the financial instruments that cause much of the contagious problem. So while Korea will have its problems because of the weakened global economy, I congratulate you for doing a pretty darn good job of navigating through the financial crisis. I'm very hopeful that 2009, towards the latter part of the year, will bring a recovery in the US and Europe. And I believe that the central governments of Japan, Europe, really the world, have done a terrific job of managing capitalism that went off of the train tracks. I'm looking forward to having a wonderful discussion with your two distinguished panelists today.
Thank you very much. Well, you mentioned about financial crisis in the world, and it's going to be maintained for a while. And with this kind of current global turbulence, what kind of leadership and talents are needed for both business and public sector? Are they different from those under prosperity? What's your thought on that, please?
I think you need people with great courage, leaders who stand up and let everyone know exactly what's happening. They don't color the picture in make-believe colors. They lay out exactly what is expected, what's happening, and how they are coping with it. They give people courage. They paint a picture of where they're going to take their countries and their companies in the midst of this turbulence. When their employees are frightened, they reassure them with honest, clear communication.
Okay, let me have another question regarding that. The financial industry has been one of the most strongest engine to give power to American industry and economy. Now it is being criticized by many people in the world, and some people say it might have to be reshaped or reformed somehow. Do you think a financial industry will do the important role in the United States or in the world in the next year or in the future again? Or do you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, it'll be, as you pointed out, it will be regulated in a more effective manner. And there will be practices put in place to understand risk better than we did up to now. But initially, everyone looked at the United States as the problem. It turns out that countries all over the world were too easy with credit. Whether you want to take on a small country like Iceland, to people all over the world ended up leveraging themselves too much. So we will have, over the next year, a deleveraging of the banking system and a deleveraging of consumers everywhere. Consumers and banks were too careless with their debt. In the middle, the industrial companies are quite strong. Most of them took good care of their balance sheets during this period. And we are going into this recession with the strongest balance sheets that we have had in corporations in some time for a recession.
Well, I think President Pitte has some questions regarding that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have a question about the education of the future leaders of the world. Don't you think that the future leaders of the world will not only need theoretical knowledge in finance, marketing, in law, in engineering, in communication, in techniques of management, all very useful knowledge, but don't you think they will need what we call in France general culture? It means philosophy, sociology, history and geography, it's my field, I'm sorry, but also arts, literature, poesy, music, fine arts. Don't you think it's absolutely necessary for a better world, for a better understanding between people, maybe also for a better management of the crisis? Because the economic crisis, actual, maybe is a problem of culture more than a problem of techniques. This is my question. I'm sorry if it is too complicated.
No, it's not too complicated. My view is that the humanities have to take a stronger role, particularly sociology, where we must understand each other's culture and behaviors. I criticize business schools around the world, and particularly US business schools, and also the leading business schools in Europe, who do not spend enough time on human resource management and what makes companies work and what makes cultures work and what motivates people to create jobs and create better lives for people. There's an enormous focus on the technique and not enough on the human interaction. The business school professors who teach about sociology, who teach about human relations, who teach about interpersonal skills, are at the bottom of the business school food chain. The teachers who teach a specialty in strategy and these techniques are at the top of the food chain. And I think that's backwards. So I think in a roundabout way, I'm agreeing with you in what leaders should have at their fingertips.
Well, Mr. Welch, you did not mention Asian universities. Does it mean Asian universities are doing all right?
No, it means I don't know much about them.
By the way, we have a renowned scholar and president administrator of KAIST, obviously, who is located, the university is located in Asia. I'd like to hear a word from him.
I guess good afternoon there. Good morning. Good morning here. I'm one of these academics who has admired what you have done at General Electric. Being an engineer, obviously I followed the history of General Electric and what you have done there. It seems to me that if I may summarize in my own way what you have done at GE was to create a lot of human talents. Indeed, it seems that you have generated a lot of CEOs for major corporations in the United States. The second thing you have done is you have gone into high technology industries, MRIs, whatnot, came out of GE, jet engines and so forth, and you have done a great job creating jobs, creating wealth, and then developing industrial base for the United States and worldwide. Third thing you have done is to steer General Electric into financial world. It's, at least based on what I heard, substantial part of income of General Electric was in the finance area. Now looking back, after you left GE, it seems that GE stock price has not done that well, and it's pretty well recognized. And during this financial turbulent period that we are in, it seems that GE has suffered a lot because of the venture that GE has gone into in this financial sector of the economy. There are several things that I like to understand, maybe you can teach me, that has to do with the following. Often we talk about wealth generation. We talk about jobs that actually creates wealth. So whenever we create jobs, sometimes we equate it being equal to creating wealth, but perhaps it's not. Perhaps the job is simply to create froth or what some people call bubbles of economic activity. So the question I have for you is, in retrospect, how do you assess or how do you feel that what was your ways of creating the human talent who later on became CEOs of major corporations? Because that's a subject every university is interested. That is, as we teach people, in fact, you taught those people who work for you to become CEOs of other companies. What are the things that you emphasize in selecting those people, in educating those people, and then how did you let them go, and how did you end up keeping current CEO of GE? What were the thoughts behind in this decision making? That's the first part of the question. After you answer that, I'll ask subsequent questions. Thank you.
May I comment on your comment about financial services? We did move into financial services in a very aggressive way. This year, General Electric will make $20 billion. Other than oil companies, no one is close. In financial services, we will have earnings of $9 to $10 billion. That'll be more than any bank in the world. We have not had massive write-offs. We have not had huge problems. We still have a AAA rating. So the presumption, and our stock price is now, the market capitalization of the company is now $220 billion. That is either second or third in the US market, despite the mix of businesses we have, including financial services. So I don't agree at all with the categorization that the move to financial services somehow or other polluted the company. That the financial services part of GE has done better than any bank in the entire world. Now, moving to the question you asked directly about human capital, let me make it clear to you that the real objective here is to grow people. And I used a screen of 4 E's and a P to categorize people. Did they have energy, the first E? Were they able to compete in a global world with lots of energy? The second E is energize. Did they energize the people around them? Were they able to do that? Thirdly, did they have edge, the ability to make the tough decisions, yes or no and not maybe? Fourth, did they execute, the fourth E, execute? And did they do all this with a huge amount of passion? Did they care about their people? Did they grow people? Were they interested? How many people did they develop? What kind of people were they? And then there are 3 other attributes that I always look for in the special people that go on to be CEO. Number 1, authenticity. Do they say what they mean? Are they always straight? Are they clear? Are they themselves in every audience? Are they themselves when they're on stage and in the quiet of their office? Authenticity. Secondly, resilience. Are they able to be hit in the nose? Are they able to go through a financial crisis like we have now? Are they able to withstand the pressure and come back? And finally, the hardest one to measure, and the one I'm by no means sure I ever get right, is can they see around corners? Anybody can see now we're in a financial crisis. I like the person that could have seen it a year ago. I like the person in 1996 who knew there was going to be an Asian crisis in 1997. That's the type of thinking. Seeing around corners is the secret ingredient of the unique CEO. That's my answer.
Well, thank you. You mentioned about 4 E's, 1 P, and authenticity, resilience, and seeing around the corner. If you want to pick up only the most important one out of these, what would you like to say?
I think authenticity.
Why is that so?
because you want somebody that people can trust. They know when they say something, they believe them, they will follow them, that people never go back on their word, they have great character. Now, that doesn't work if you're stupid. So we're assuming that they're going to be smart people. But with smart people, you desperately want authenticity.
Okay, then let's go back to the presidential election. Now you have a new leader in the country. Based on your criteria like that, how could you evaluate his leadership?
Well, I don't know him well enough yet, but let's go over it for a minute.
All right.
He certainly has energy.
All right.
He's certainly been able to energize a crowd.
Okay.
He's certainly had edge and done the job of making the good, hard decisions. And he's certainly been able to execute. And he's done it with real drive. I wrote a column tonight before I came over here. And the column is Why Barack Obama Won. 3 reasons. Now, there are many reasons. One, he raised $1 billion. But there's lots of reasons. And there are reasons with lessons for managers. 3 lessons I like to talk about. Lesson 1 is have a clear vision and a clear message, and repeat it over and over and over again. Don't change your message. Don't confuse people. Don't go off track. Don't change direction all the time. It confuses people and they can't get on your train. Number 2, execution. He executed the campaign brilliantly. First against Mrs. Clinton. First against Mrs. Clinton. And the lesson for leaders is this. Mrs. Clinton did everything in what we call the same way. She went to California, New York, Ohio, all the big states. It's like the salesman who calls on their old customers. Barack Obama went to a new market, the Caucasus states. So he was out in the Dakotas, in Montana, and Nevada, and places like that. And he won by winning the Caucasus states, not the big states. He opened up new markets. And that's what great CEOs do. They open up new markets. And thirdly, you want to have friends in high places if you're a CEO. You want to have your board with you, your board of directors with you. And what he got with him was the media. The media loved him. They followed him. When he made a mistake, they didn't write about it much. So they covered for him. And then he didn't surprise the media. He gave them a vice president, Mr. Biden, who had been well vetted by the press. So the press was comfortable with Mr. Biden. Mr. McCain, on the other hand, the press didn't support him. They hammered him because his message changed. They were in love with Obama. But he did something else. He surprised the press by the appointment of Sarah Palin. They didn't expect it. They didn't know it. They were surprised. You never want to surprise the press, and you never want to surprise your board of directors. So there were 3 clear lessons from what he did that every CEO should understand. I just wrote this column tonight.
Thank you very much for your insight. I think President Pitte has something to say also.
Yes, not about the election, but
all right.
about the forum. Mr. Chairman, at the moment we live in the world a very rapid evolution in many fields, in technology, in geopolitics, and in management environment. I would like to have your opinion about the talents necessary for the future. Which aspects of the talent of the managers, of the leaders of the world, are not enough developed today. Have you an opinion on this topic, please? It's important for our universities and in order to prepare a new way of education.
Well, I already mentioned that we had to spend more time on the human equation. But the other thing that is occurring very rapidly is that the power structure is moving from top down to bottoms up. People are able, with the internet, things like Facebook, MySpace, and other things, to form communities. So if somebody in the organization in the past had an idea and their boss didn't like it, the boss could sweep it away. Tomorrow's leader is going to have to deal with these intellectual communities being formed in his or her organization that are going to challenge what the status quo is. And they're going to have companies that are thirsty for learning, that take these communities and the knowledge they have and leverage them into a global competitive advantage. There's so much knowledge now, and things are moving so quickly that leaders are going to have to be able to be comfortable with lots of communities within their companies, bringing up ideas, intellectual content coming, pouring at them, and be able to sift tons of information, literally tons of information, and know what to choose and what to throw away. But they're going to be challenged from the side, from up in the organization, and everywhere, in a much faster pace than ever before. And leaders are going to have to be comfortable with this attack on their authority and be open to taking advantage of this knowledge.
Well, President Tso, do you have any comments on this or around this?
Well, I don't have particular comments on his comment there, but I have a question, and maybe it's a way of getting a free consulting out of you. As you know, this forum is dealing with the topic of globalization and creativity. So we are interested in creating people who are global and who are creative. And at KAIST, that's the institution that I head up here in Korea, it's sort of like a counterpart of MIT in Korea. I think the quality of our university, in terms of quality of our students, is equal to that of MIT. And indeed, we do excellent research in a number of different areas. We're much smaller. We don't have as much resource, both human and financial, but I think we are doing okay. But one of the issues as we try to globalize, and we have done a number of things, such as instruction of all undergraduate subjects in English and so on and so forth. But as we do all of these, we find that the fact that KAIST is located in middle of Korea is not helping us in terms of globalization, in terms of attracting international faculty, international students, and so on and so forth. So in some ways, I guess we have not done a good job in terms of advertising ourselves. And as the CEO of GE, and what would you have done if you were at KAIST? What would you have done to make KAIST more global, make it more competitive, and then be better known and be a place where all the scholars want to come and do their research and teach?
Can I answer this with a humble apology for not knowing enough specifically about your university, and I apologize for that. So I'll make some comments, and please take them as my best efforts with limited knowledge. I think when you have a question like that, it's a question of, if you've got the talent, how are you celebrating the successes of the talent? America has many problems. It does many things wrong. It gets itself in some crazy world situations. But one of the things it does do well is it celebrates its scientists. It celebrates its inventors. You know from your time at MIT, the heroes are made from scientists. And the celebration of their success is very, very important. I teach at MIT now also. I teach business, not science. I have a PhD in engineering, but I would call myself at best an average engineer. But I would say that making your place a place of celebration, creating heroes, making examples of faculty members, making examples of students who have gone on to great things, that is without question the sort of the flag waving that must be done to create for a university a reputation, a drawing card. You know from your wonderful years at MIT, everyone who wants to be an engineer wants to go to MIT. MIT is celebrated all over Boston, all over the United States, in fact, all over the world. They have venture capital right next to it. They have venture capital that sits right beside the university. Do you have a venture capital pool? Have the companies of Korea put venture capital money around your engineers there in your university? I don't know. I wish we were together over a drink talking about this rather than over this transmission, which makes it very hard to interact and really talk with you about making this the place to be.
Well, next time you're coming to this area, or perhaps we can make a special trip to KAIST so we can entertain you, and then I'll buy the drink, and then perhaps you can talk to our students and inspire them, and I'm sure that they'll be inspired by what you have to say, as well as our faculty. So anyway, I hope that we can have an occasion like that. I think that many things you said is quite true. We are trying to do some of the things you stated that is necessary, and we will continue to take those actions. And we are still in the situation where we need, some people advise us that we need to have a PR firm to let people know how good we are. But obviously, it's not a proper thing, perhaps, for a university to do. But in any case, next time we have a chance to get together, certainly we can talk about this issue, because it's not really the issue for KAIST as such. It is an issue for all higher education in Korea. Korea sends 84% of its high school graduates to universities, and there are some very excellent universities. But it is true that in Korea, the support for universities is distributed uniformly. There is no concentrated investment in a few select universities, which the United States could do in the name of national defense. DOD invested a lot of money in MIT, speaking of MIT, because they needed talents, they need science and technology in certain select areas. And there's no mechanism like that in Korea. Here, everything is got to be distributed equally among all, and all of them do not have sufficient resource to mount a major effort. So anyway, so the reason I asked that question is, in some ways, for Korean audience here, that indeed, for Korea to advance, it has to change its policy. The current policy of everybody having to share the wealth equally doesn't seem to work because the pot is just too small. And anyway, thank you for your comments.
Well, that's the reason.
No, may I make a comment, please?
Yes, please. Yes.
The comment that Professor Su said is true not only in universities, it's true in business. You never want to spread the pie equally. You must differentiate in every activity in life. You must differentiate. Spreading the peanut butter on the table equally is a formula for no success. Even though I must admit, Korea's had great success industrially, we must fight to support differentiation. And universities do desperately need, I couldn't agree more, need differentiation.
Well, President, so maybe I can suggest one small solution to that. You know, that's the reason why I founded Asia Pacific Association for International Education. So about 1,000 people get together to know each other, to share the visions. So please utilize the organization. Well, we are talking about the university education, and now I'd like to continue a little bit on education administration, because this is quite different from what businessmen are doing in the industry. Well, there was a great person in history who has been 5-star general, president of Columbia University, and the 34th president of America. His name is President Eisenhower. He one day confessed that out of the 3 jobs, the university president was the most difficult job to do. There was an episode that the senior professor counter-argued in front of him that professors are not employees, but the university itself. This tells us that universities that are considered to be the most important education institution for future leaders and talents have quite different culture from that of businesses. Mr. Welch, if you take a university president's office, let's say Columbia University again, would you apply the same winning strategy and winning way and leadership as you wrote in your book?
I would commit suicide before becoming a university president. It's an impossible job. You have to go out and fundraise all the time to raise money for the school.
Right.
You have professors who are tenured, who can sleep on the job and do anything, and you can't get rid of them once they're there and tenured. It's just an awful job. It's a flawed system.
Well, would you like to comment on it? Let's hear what's happening in Europe.
No, it's the most terrible job possible in Europe, to be a president of university. Because we have, in Europe, in France particularly, we have not only our colleagues to manage, but also the trade unions of students and the administrative staff. And I can tell you that it's not so easy. But may I ask a question to Mr. Welch? I have a question about the foreign languages spoken in the leadership of the world. During the Roman Empire, everybody was speaking Latin. In China, in the Chinese Asia, influenced by China Asia, everybody was not speaking Chinese, but writing Chinese. In Europe, during 18th and 19th century, everybody was speaking French and another or 2 or 3 other languages. And 1 century ago, most of the leaders of the world were speaking 3, 4, 5 different languages, and not only speaking, but also writing. It was the case, for example, in Hungary at the beginning of 20th century. But today, most of the leaders are speaking 2 languages in Korea, sometimes 3, but 2, and in America, 1 language. Very few people are speaking 2 languages in America among the leaders of economy and politics. What do you think about this? Don't you think in the future it will be necessary to speak 2, 3, or 4 languages in order to be open-minded, to have the idea that everybody don't speak the same thing in the world? And with language, you don't tell only objective things, but also something coming from the depth of heart. And it's very important for the leading of the world. What do you think about this, Mr. Chairman?
Well, by the way, when he was a president in Sorbonne, he opened many courses taught in English, by the way.
No. We opened, I will tell, in Abu Dhabi 2 years ago, we opened an annex of Sorbonne, and all the lectures are in French.
Well, last year you told me that you have many courses taught in English.
We have,
in Sorbonne.
No, in Sorbonne we have courses in English, in management, in economy, in communication, but no more than 10 or 20%. Maybe it's not enough, but
Okay.
we teach also in German. In
Mr. Welch, I'm sorry to disturb you. It's your turn.
Well, I'd prefer that you two keep talking. But I would definitely tell you that obviously the more languages one has, the better they are. My head of international operations, Paolo Fresco, was comfortable in 4 or 5 languages, and it made him much more effective in global operations and negotiations than I was. When we would negotiate, his skill base was always such that he had, as you point out, Professor, a very intimate knowledge of what the other side was thinking. I think more knowledge is good, but I'll tell you, in America, today, the young people are not learning French or German, they're learning Chinese. I have 2 stepchildren now that have spent the last 2 summers, they were in high school, now they're in college, spent their summers in various small towns in China. They are fluent in Mandarin. They are very comfortable in China. My nephew, who's 21 years old, has moved to China to become a teacher there. So China is becoming, in America, the second language, not some of the old European languages.
Well, let's talk about Jack Welch way of doing business and Jack Welch way of leadership. You talked about 20-70-10 rules by a good appraisal system, rewarding, and direct communication. But in some other cultures and traditions, like Asia, it would be challenging and probably very difficult to implement. In particular, to kick off the lower 10%. If you are in that position in the culture, what would you like to do?
Well, I operated very large Asian businesses in China, in Korea, in Thailand, in Indonesia, and of course Japan, where we were extremely strong. I have to tell you that 20-70-10 is moderated in those countries, but nevertheless, it's the same principle. The top 20% of your group loves to know they're the top 20. The best people in the companies in that room there today, of your CEOs in that room, want to know that those CEOs think and know they're the best people. And the middle 70 want to know how they can get to the top 20. And the bottom 10, when you tell them that they're not good enough to play in your league, you don't fire them. We don't fire them in America. We tell them they're in the bottom 10. And in the bottom 10, no one wants to be there. The problem you have in Asia is no one wants to tell somebody they're in the bottom 10. But when you build a culture where people tell them they're in the bottom 10, people will eventually move on to someplace else. No one wants to work in an environment, whether they're in China, whether they're in Seoul, or whether they're in New York, where they are perceived and know they are in the bottom 10%. Now, Mr. Gene Kang is in the audience, and if somebody wants to talk to him about the experiences in Korea, he can talk with them at the break.
Well, President Seo is currently trying to reform his university under that kind of cultural difficulties. Would you like to say something on that?
Well, KAIST is so good that we don't have to reform it, but just improve it. And indeed, we are doing that. We do tell people where they stand. Indeed, we encourage people to look for other jobs when we feel that they are not going to make it at KAIST. So we have gone through all that. That has been somewhat of a cultural shock, but I think it's working. And we are hopeful that, I didn't know about this 20-10 rule, but we have been doing more or less something like that. And I think in Korea that's very much needed, because it turns out that some people are not suited for a certain kind of institution. So there has to be a better match between the talents of the people and the goals of the institution. So that's what we've been trying to do, and I think we have been reasonably successful. And that goes with the faculty, students, and staff. And with the staff, it has been much more difficult because we have a strong labor union. And then but even there, I'm encouraging them to agree on the new scheme of doing things, where we encourage outstanding performers by giving them longer tenure, that is the retirement, extending retirement age, and then at the same time letting the bottom 2% to leave the institution if they continue to be in bottom 2% for 2 years in a row. So we are trying to make these changes, and then it's going to take time, but I'm sure that someday it's going to be done because it makes sense. It is the right thing to do, and when something's right, eventually people will buy into it. At least that's my assumption at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Welch, it might be a little...
Professor Sue?
Okay.
Professor Sue?
Yes.
First of all, God bless you.
I need it.
And secondly, this is the kindest thing you can do to people, to let them know where they stand. No one wants to be told late in life that they weren't very good. The story we always tell is when a recession or a financial crisis like we're having now, or an economic crisis comes, and people at Samsung, or people at Hyundai, or GE, or IBM have to lay people off. They walk into the room and they say, unfortunately, Mary, you must go home. You must go home. And Mary looks up and she said, why? And they say, well, Mary, you weren't very good. You weren't good enough at your job, Mary. And Mary says, I've been here for 30 years. Why didn't you ever tell me?
Okay, this might be a little bit sensitive question for you. You mentioned that empowerment...
Nothing sensitive, nothing.
All right, good, thank you. You mentioned that the empowerment is the most important for a CEO, and he must spend 75% of time to find potential talents and to nurture them like a gardener. In this regard, your predecessor, Mr. Reginald Johns, has done a very good job, obviously because he picked you up. After 20 years later, you picked up, nurtured and blessed Mr. Jeffrey Immelt as your successor. Then, according to an article by Ms. Duke, you publicly criticized him on CNBC, recently. If this is true, I'm curious that what your thought on what you have thought on what you have decided as CEO 7 years ago. What would you like to do if there is a time machine?
I would very much like to appoint Mr. Immelt. I just had dinner with him tonight. What you are referring to is a story that went around the world when I was on television on CNBC. I was playing with the reporter, and we know each other too well, the reporter and I. And he asked me back and forth, he said, well, Mr. Immelt missed the second quarter. And I said, look, he's done a great job. The company's going to make $20 billion, more or less the same speech I gave to Professor Su before. And he said, come on, Jack, come on, tell me, what happens if he misses again? And I said, of course he's not going to miss. He's doing a terrific job. He had some bad luck. And he said, come on, tell me. And I said, I'd shoot him. Laughing.
Okay.
But you can't say that on television.
All right, thank you very much.
It doesn't read well in print.
Okay, would you like to say something?
No, just a comment. I think the leaders of the world in management, in politics, in academics will need in the future the optimism of Mr. Chairman. We need so much optimism and to laugh with serious things. It's not so common in the world today.
Any comments on this comment, Mr. Welch?
No, I would say thank you.
Well, who do you consider the most influential or greatest teacher for you?
Well, if you want to really know, it was my mother. I was the only child of an Irish mother who was born to her when she was 40. I had a speech impediment, which I still have, which you can hear. And as I would stutter in conversation, she would say to me, "Oh, don't worry, Jack. It's just that your tongue can't keep up with your brain." And I played sports. And I was captain of 3 teams. And I wasn't that big. But I kept getting self-confidence from my parents, who were constantly, because I was an only child, the sun came on me. And then as I learned, as I went to school, I was comfortable with older people. So as I was in college, faculty members liked me. I was comfortable with my parents and their friends, who were much older. And when I went to graduate school, my professors found me to be a good friend, and I was a good friend to them. I loved them. So the fact that I was always getting self-confidence from people, always telling me I was better than I really probably ever was a very reassuring thing. And I think at a university, giving kids that are doing well self-confidence and making them feel, as I always say, 6 foot 4 inches tall with hair is about the greatest thing you can do for somebody.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to ask a little different question because I'm currently a member of Korean National Brand Committee, which is now currently is forming. So I'm just curious, your spontaneous recall. What's your image of Korea to you? Can you say it in 3 words?
Tough? I need 4.
Okay, I'll allow you.
Tough, smart, hardworking.
Oh, thank you very much. And if you are in the committee, if you want to improve it, what would you like to do? What would be the best position where Korea must go?
Well, this is very difficult for an American whose country has invaded foreign countries. But I would say that a softer image for Korea, less of a narrow, determined hardness, and a more human face would be its biggest improvement.
Thank you very much. On the way to the KAIST, please.
And I apologize
okay.
for being an American.
Well, I'd like to hear something more from you so that if you come to Korea to visit KAIST, President Seo, on the way to KAIST, please stop by my office. I will treat you more than what he would like to do.
Thank you.
The shortest way from America to Korea is France. Please stop in Paris.
Well, I think this is about the time to wrap up this plenary session because time runs up so fast. Nobody will deny that talents and human resources are important, especially in Korea. It is a genuinely true statement. Korean society must appreciate the contribution of leaders and talents. Mr. Welch, would you like to say something last, please?
Well, I have been, first of all, my thank you to the panelists who were here today. I thought they were terrific. This is a difficult format to have a real interaction, but I think they were fantastic, and they deserve credit from the audience. As far as Korea is concerned, I have always been incredibly impressed with Korean leadership, whether it be Chairman Chung, old Chairman Chung at Hyundai that I used to arm wrestle with, or whether it be the new chairman of LG, who is making a name for himself around the world in his human resource management. He seems to be developing the human resource type of things that Professor Su talked about. He seems to be building a new culture at LG that, from what I read and hear from people I know who visit there, is extremely impressive. That's not to say that other companies aren't doing the same. I've just heard some marvelous things about LG of late. So, in closing, I would congratulate Korea again on dealing so well with the financial crisis, and I wish them well as their heavily driven export economy is challenged like it's never been challenged before in 2009 with a difficult global economy. And I hope and wish them all the very, very best. Thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you for the panelists and all of the audiences and especially thank you very much indeed to share your thought and time, Mr. Welch. So long.